Hi, everyone. I'm Jack, and welcome to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about reading and how it can help you learn English. I'm excited to be joined by Elena, an expert in language learning.
Hello. It's great to be here.
It seems like everyone needs strong English skills these days. Whether you're applying for university or even just looking for a new job, good English is essential.
That's very true. We live in a world where communication is so important, and English has really become the language of global communication.
And the
Yeah.
interesting thing is reading can be a much more effective way to learn English than, some of the more traditional methods,
hmm
the ones that focus mostly on grammar rules.
Yes. There's a lot of research that really supports this idea. For example, there was a study done with a group of young people who were struggling in school. Some of them had even been in trouble with the law.
Oh, wow. That's quite a challenging group.
It was. But the researchers gave them access to a lot of different books, things like adventure stories and novels, books that they would actually enjoy reading.
So not just textbooks.
Exactly. And the results were amazing. The students, their reading and writing skills improved significantly. But what was even more remarkable was their change in attitude towards school.
It sounds like reading opened up a whole new world for them.
It did. They became more engaged in learning and more motivated to succeed. And this wasn't just a one-off study. Researchers in Fiji and Singapore found, similar results with ESL students.
So reading really can be a secret weapon for language learners.
I believe so. It's a natural and enjoyable way to, absorb the language.
But I think a lot of people might be wondering how to even approach reading if they're still learning English.
That's a great question. The key is to find material that you enjoy, and that's easy enough for you to understand. You shouldn't be stopping every few words to, look something up.
So it's okay to read books that might seem too simple.
Absolutely. In fact, it's better to start with something you can easily understand and enjoy. This is called extensive reading.
Extensive reading. I like the sound of that.
It's all about reading a lot and reading for pleasure. The goal is to find books where you understand about 98% of the words. This keeps the reading process smooth and enjoyable.
So no more struggling through dense textbooks.
Not if you don't want to. The goal is to enjoy the experience. When you're reading for pleasure, you're more likely to absorb the language naturally.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like when you're listening to music in a foreign language. You might not understand every word, but you can still enjoy the rhythm and the melody.
That's a great analogy. And just like with music, the more you listen, the more you start to understand.
And the same goes for reading. The more you read, the more you'll expand your vocabulary and improve your grammar.
Precisely. And as you become more confident, you can gradually challenge yourself with, more difficult material.
It's like working out at the gym, right? You start with weights you can comfortably lift and then gradually increase the weight as you get stronger.
I like that comparison. It's about finding the right level of challenge and gradually pushing yourself further.
So we've talked about the importance of finding enjoyable and easy to read material. But what about mindset? Does that play a role in, successful language learning through reading?
Absolutely. Just like an athlete trains for a competition, successful language learners approach their learning with focus and dedication.
So it's not just about passively reading a few pages now and then.
No, it's about being actively engaged with the material. It's about setting goals and tracking your progress.
So we need to bring that champion energy to our reading practice.
Yes, exactly. Think of yourself as an athlete training for the Language Olympics. You need to be consistent, you need to be dedicated, and you need to enjoy the process.
I love that analogy. It's about setting goals, pushing yourself, and celebrating your achievements along the way.
That's right. And remember, even small steps can lead to big results. Just a few minutes of reading each day can make a huge difference over time.
That's really encouraging to hear. It's not about finding hours of free time. It's about making the most of the time we have.
Exactly. Even 15 minutes before bed can be a valuable opportunity to learn and grow.
Okay, so we've talked about finding the right books and having the right mindset. Are there any practical strategies people can use to get the most out of their reading time?
There are many. One simple but effective technique is to highlight entire sentences instead of just individual words.
Why is that more helpful?
Well, because it helps you understand the context. When you highlight a whole sentence, you see how the words work together. You learn phrases and grammatical structures naturally.
I've always focused on highlighting single words. I can see how that might be limiting.
It's a common mistake. We tend to focus on individual words when we should be looking at the bigger picture.
So highlighting sentences helps us see the forest for the trees.
Exactly. And once you've highlighted those key sentences, you can take it a step further and create flashcards.
Flashcards. That takes me back to school.
I know. They might seem a bit old-fashioned. But flashcards are a great way to reinforce new vocabulary and phrases.
So it's about taking those highlighted sentences and turning them into like bite-sized learning tools.
That's right. And there are even apps that can help you with this. Apps like Anki use spaced repetition to make learning more efficient.
Spaced repetition. I've heard of that. Can you explain how it works?
Sure. It's a system that helps you remember things more effectively. Basically, it shows you flashcards at specific intervals based on how well you remember them. The more you struggle with a card, the more frequently it will show up.
So it's like a personal trainer for your vocabulary.
You could say that. It's a way to personalize your learning and make sure you're retaining the information.
That's a fantastic tip. I'm definitely going to check out Anki.
I think you'll find it very helpful. It's a game changer for language learning. Now, we've talked about choosing the right books, having the right mindset, and using effective strategies like highlighting sentences and creating flashcards. But how can you actually find books that are a good fit for your level and interests?
That's a great question. Where do we even go from here? There are so many books out there. It can be overwhelming to know where to start.
I agree. But don't worry, there are plenty of resources to help you find the perfect book. We can discuss them in the next part of the show.
That sounds great. I'm eager to learn more about finding those hidden gems.
Me too. We'll explore different genres, talk about graded readers, and share some tips for navigating the world of English books.
This is all so helpful. I can't wait to dive into the next part of our conversation.
I'm looking forward to it.
Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our conversation about the benefits of reading for English learners.
It's great to be back.
Before the break, we were talking about finding the right books to read. And you mentioned a really interesting idea about starting with familiar stories.
Yes. One great way to start is to look for English translations of books you've already enjoyed in your native language.
I think that's a great tip, especially for beginners. It can be less intimidating to read something you're already familiar with.
Exactly. You already know the plot and the characters, so you can focus more on understanding the language.
And it can be a really fun way to experience a familiar story in a new way.
It definitely can. You might even discover new nuances and layers of meaning that you didn't notice before.
Now, I know some people might be thinking that rereading a book isn't as beneficial as reading something new.
I understand that perspective, but rereading a book in English can actually be very helpful. Each time you read it, you're likely to pick up new vocabulary and grammar structures.
It's like watching a favorite movie multiple times. You always notice new details that you didn't see before.
That's a great analogy. And just like with movies, the more familiar you are with the story, the more you can focus on the language.
So rereading isn't just about comfort, it's actually a valuable learning tool.
Precisely. It's a way to deepen your understanding of the language and reinforce what you've learned.
Now, speaking of movies, I remember you mentioned reading books that have been adapted into films or TV shows.
Yes, that's another great strategy. It can be really helpful to watch the movie or show first to get a visual representation of the story.
I think that would be especially helpful for visual learners.
Absolutely. Having those images in your mind can make it much easier to follow along with the text.
And it can be fun to compare and contrast the book and the movie.
Definitely. Sometimes the adaptations are very faithful to the source material, and sometimes they take creative liberties.
I love seeing how different directors and screenwriters interpret a story.
It's fascinating to see how they bring the characters and the setting to life.
This gives me an idea. I think it would be great to start a book club where people read a book and then watch the movie adaptation together.
That's a wonderful idea. It would be a fun and engaging way to practice English and share different perspectives.
I'm definitely going to look into that.
I think you should. It would be a great way to build community and make learning more enjoyable.
So we've talked about choosing books we're familiar with and books that have been adapted into movies. But I know another big challenge for many people is simply finding the time to read.
That's true. Life can be very busy.
It often feels like there just aren't enough hours in the day.
I understand. But even a small amount of reading each day can make a big difference.
How much reading would you recommend for someone who's, just starting out?
Even just 15 minutes a day can be beneficial.
That's encouraging to hear. It doesn't sound as daunting as I thought.
Exactly. The key is to be consistent. Make reading a regular part of your routine.
Do you have any tips for making that happen?
One helpful strategy is to treat reading like an appointment. Schedule it into your calendar and stick to it as much as possible.
So instead of saying, I'll read when I have time, I need to actually block out time for it.
Exactly. And try to find a time that works best for you. Maybe it's first thing in the morning, during your lunch break, or right before bed.
I think consistency is key with any new habit.
It definitely is. The more you read, the easier it will become, and the more you'll enjoy it.
Now, I know we've been talking a lot about reading physical books, but what about audiobooks?
Audiobooks are a fantastic option. They can be a great way to fit reading into your busy schedule.
I used to listen to audiobooks during my commute, but I haven't done that in a while.
I encourage you to start again. It's a wonderful way to multitask. You can listen while you're driving, exercising, or even doing chores.
And it's a great way to improve your listening comprehension.
Absolutely. You're exposed to authentic pronunciation and intonation.
It's like having a personal language tutor in your ear.
Exactly. And there's such a wide variety of audiobooks available these days. You can find pretty much any book you're interested in.
I think I'm going to check out my local library and see what they have.
Libraries are a great resource for audiobooks, and many libraries offer digital audiobooks that you can download to your phone or tablet.
That's so convenient.
It really is. Technology has made it easier than ever to access books in English.
So we've talked about finding the time to read and exploring different formats like audiobooks. But now I want to delve a little deeper into the learning process itself.
That sounds great. What would you like to discuss?
Well, we've mentioned the importance of, active reading, but I'm curious to know more about specific strategies for learning vocabulary and grammar from reading.
That's an important topic, and there are some very effective techniques that we can discuss in the next part of our conversation.
This is all so helpful. I'm eager to learn more.
Me too.
Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our conversation about how reading can help you learn English.
It's great to be back.
Before the break, we were talking about specific strategies for learning vocabulary and grammar from reading. I'm really interested to hear more about this.
Well, one of the most effective techniques is to analyze the sentences you've highlighted.
You mean the sentences we highlighted for their interesting vocabulary or grammar?
Exactly. Once you've highlighted those sentences, take some time to really examine them. Look up any words you don't know and try to figure out how the sentence is structured.
So it's like being a detective looking for clues.
Yes. It's about being an active reader, not just passively taking in the words.
I can see how that would be more beneficial. It's about engaging with the text and really thinking about how the language works.
Exactly. And as you do this more and more, you'll start to notice patterns. You'll begin to understand how words and grammar rules work together.
It's like putting together a puzzle.
Yes. And as you put more pieces together, the bigger picture becomes clearer.
And the more you understand, the more you'll enjoy reading.
Absolutely. It's a positive feedback loop. The more you read, the better you understand. And the better you understand, the more you want to read.
Now, I remember you also mentioned keeping a vocabulary notebook.
Yes. That's another great strategy for learning new words. Whenever you come across a word you don't know, write it down in your notebook.
And it's not just about writing down the word itself, right?
No. It's helpful to write down the definition and an example sentence as well.
That way you can see how the word is used in context.
Exactly. And you can also add a little drawing or a picture to help you remember the word.
I think that's a great idea for visual learners.
It can make the learning process more engaging and memorable.
So we have our highlighted sentences, our vocabulary notebook, and of course our flashcards.
Those are all excellent tools for language learning.
It sounds like we have a whole toolkit for success.
Yes. And the best part is that you can customize your toolkit to fit your own learning style.
I think that's so important. What works for one person might not work for another.
Absolutely. It's about finding what works best for you and making it a part of your routine.
And most importantly, it's about enjoying the process.
That's right. Learning English should be a fun and rewarding experience.
Well, Elena, this has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today.
It's been my pleasure, Jack.
I feel like I've learned so much. And I'm really inspired to start incorporating reading into my language learning routine.
That's wonderful to hear. Remember, the most important thing is to just start reading. Find something you enjoy, make it a regular habit, and don't be afraid to experiment.
I think that's great advice for anyone who wants to improve their English. Thank you again for joining us today, Elena.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
And to all our listeners, happy reading. We'll see you next time.